Mr. Eisenhower to join. Oh, do the roll first, please. Mr. Powell, thank you.
Mr. Hippel?
Here.
Mr. McGlennon?
Here.
Ms. Larson?
Here.
And Ms. Knoll?
Here. And we'd like a motion to allow Mr. Eisenhower to come in remotely, please.
Motion for approval.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Mr. McGlennon?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Ms. Knoll?
Aye. Welcome, Jim.
Okay, loud and clear. How about me?
Okay.
Yep, real good.
So we have board discussions, sir?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. I do not have any proposed changes to the proposed FY 25-26 budget since it's been released, but I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
I don't really have any questions. I just want to say thank you for your participation at the community meetings and for the thorough presentation and for all the work that you went into explaining the budget and all the work really that you and all the team at JCSA have done to really watch cost, even though they've been escalating at such a high cost for the organization. Just thank you for that.
Thank you.
Oh, I'd like to say the same. I think at the town halls, your presentation was fabulous. Nobody came to me and started complaining about anything after that because it was pretty, it was pretty cut and dry. So
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well,
And I just would echo my colleagues on that matter, and also I mentioned to you, I think, in an email that I'd had a conversation with a constituent who was very appreciative of the new website and the information provided on the new bill. So all good news there.
And if I get the opportunity, I'll jump in.
Go ahead, Jim.
Okay, I just wanted to I think for the record, let people know that I am attending remotely from London. And I too want to echo my appreciation for the presentations that JCSA did. Mr. Powell, your presentations really were spot on, and I think it really helped alleviate a lot of the concerns that people might have had.
All right.
thank you. Is that
Thank
it? Okay. We'd like to adjourn till 5 p.m. on May 14th for the regular meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Mr. McGlennon?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Like he's stuck.
He's
Stuck.
frozen.
Okay. And Ms. Knoll?
Aye.
All right. Thank you all
Thank
very
you.
much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Call this meeting of the James City County Board of Supervisors, our business meeting, to order. Good afternoon, everyone. Mr. Stevens, if you could please call the roll.
Ms. Knoll,
Present.
Mr. Hippel,
Here.
Mr. McGlennon,
Here.
Ms. Larson.
Here. I do need a motion to allow Mr. Eisenhower to join the meeting remotely due to travel out of the country.
So moved.
So moved.
Thank you. Mr. Stevens?
Ms. Knoll,
Aye.
Mr. Hippel,
Aye.
Mr. McGlennon,
Aye.
Ms. Larson.
Aye. And I'm trying to see if, Mr. Eisenhower?
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay, Mr.
Finally came back. Sorry.
That's okay. Mr. Eisenhower, if you could also just give us a general idea of where you're attending the meeting from.
Yes, ma'am. I'm attending from London, England.
Thank you so much.
And Mr. Eisenhower, our attorney had asked just for personal reasons that you were absent from this meeting.
Yes, it's personal reasons. Yeah.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, we do not have, well, Mr. Stevens, presentations?
I do. I think that we've got our deputy clerk coming forward. I would like to take a moment and recognize Teresa Said, our deputy clerk, and ask that she come forward to the podium. I will say in advance of the 55th Annual Professional Municipal Clerks Week, which happens to fall May 5th through 11th this year, I wanted to take a moment to recognize Ms. Said and felt it appropriate to recognize her for supporting you as elected officials and myself as your county administrator, and really for her willingness to serve as a statewide Virginia Municipal Clerks Association as president for the past year. I think she just turned over the gavel this past weekend, and thank her for that, and have a proclamation that I asked Ms. Larson to present to her that sort of reflects that. So,
All right. I'm going to come down by you so I can read this. Whereas the office of the professional municipal clerk, a time-honored and vital part of local government, exists throughout the world, and whereas professional municipal clerks have pledged to be ever mindful of their neutrality and impartiality, rendering equal service to all, and whereas the office of the professional municipal clerk provides the professional link between the citizens, the local governing bodies, and agencies of government at other levels, and whereas professional municipal clerks continually strive to improve the administration of the affairs of the office of the professional municipal clerk through participation in education programs, seminars, workshops, and the annual meetings of their state, you know what I mean, county, yeah, thank you, and international professional organizations. And whereas Teresa has worked for James City County since 2012 when she was secretary to the board, and because of her enthusiasm for the work was able to meet all of the education, training, and certifications necessary to be promoted to deputy clerk to the board in 2019. And whereas the board is proud to celebrate the outstanding achievement of our deputy clerk to the board, Teresa Said, in serving as the president of the Virginia Municipal Clerks Association in 2023. And whereas Teresa has demonstrated unparalleled commitment to advancing the profession of clerks and elevating the standards within our state through years of service and expertise. And whereas the Board of Supervisors relies on Teresa, exclamation point, for much of the coordination and operation of board meetings, and her experience undoubtedly provides leadership to all other clerks throughout the Commonwealth. Now, therefore, be it resolved that I, the chairman of the Board of Supervisors of James City County, does hereby commend the outstanding professionalism of Teresa Said and presents this award as a token of appreciation for her dedicated service to the county and to the community, in witness whereof I hereunto set my hand and cause the seal of the county of James City, Virginia to be affixed this 23rd day of April, 2024. Thank you. Congratulations. Yeah. Let's get a picture. Everybody?
I'm gonna get in there too.
Yes, congratulations to Teresa. We very much appreciate all that she does. Consent calendar. Today's consent calendar consists of the following items: acceptance of funds, $3,244, Virginia Forfeited Asset Sharing Program, Asset Works Fleet Management Software, contract award for $241,751, additional roll-off truck, contract award $260,192, knuckle boom truck replacement, contract award strategic plan, contract renewal fiber optic maintenance services, Cable Associates Inc., 7 minutes adoption. Does anyone wish to pull an item?
Move the adoption of the consent calendar.
Thank you. Mr. Stevens?
Ms. Knoll?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Mr. McGlennon? Aye. Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Motion carries.
Thank you. That brings us to board discussions. ARPA funding discussion. Stephanie, or, okay, Sharon?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board. I would like to introduce Stephanie Williams-Ordery. She is the county's grants and special projects analyst. She has been with the county for over 23 years, 21 years of which she spent in the police department in various capacities, and the last 2 years with FMS. She moved over to help us with ARPA when we received that money 2 years ago, so we thought it'd be appropriate for her to provide that update today. As a side note, I also just wanted to mention that Stephanie alone manages over $37 million of state and federal grants on an annual basis. That does not comprise all of our grants, but is a large portion of our grants, and it obviously saves our residents quite a bit of money. So I wanted to mention that as well. And with that, I'll turn it over.
Thank you so much. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board. Thank you so much for having me today. Let's see, get this started. Bear with me on the technology a moment. I'm sorry about that.
No worries.
Just as a quick recap, the Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Funds Program, authorized by the American Rescue Plan Act, delivered $350 billion to state, territorial, local, and tribal governments across the country to support their response to and recovery from the COVID-19 pandemic in 2021. As part of that, the county received $14.8 million. This funding is being accounted for in its own separate fund, which means that it's not commingled with our general funds. Additionally, the funds are separate because they are subject to extensive reporting and audit requirements. There were 4 eligible categories for the use of these funds, and the county elected the permitted use of providing government services to the extent of revenue reductions due to the public health emergency or revenue loss. This was also the broadest option for the use of funds. We're currently preparing for 2 key dates. All funds must be obligated by December 31st, 2024, and all funds must be expended by December 31st, 2026. We are working closely with the departments to ensure that these expectations are met appropriately, especially between now and June 30th in the event that we need to come back to you all to reappropriate any of these funds. Further, I do want to note that Treasury has recently come out with additional guidance that allows us to move funds between projects after the obligation date. And now I'll provide a brief summary on the ARPA-funded projects. There were multiple projects initiated within housing and neighborhood development. All of these projects were recommendations from the Workforce Housing Task Force. The first, affordable housing revenue recovery. The county uses funds from community development block grants and indoor plumbing repair loan payments to fund additional housing initiatives. During the pandemic, these loans were forgiven in full in Virginia. Thereby, this stream of revenue for housing initiatives was eliminated. Through this project, staff organized a home repair blitz in partnership with Habitat for Humanity to provide home repairs to low-income, elderly, disabled, and veteran homeowners in the county. Remaining funds will be used towards the development of property acquired for affordable and workforce housing, which brings me to the next project, acquisition of property. The county is currently under contract to purchase properties that will be developed into a new neighborhood with homes to be sold or rented to families with low to moderate income. In 2019, the Workforce Housing Task Force conducted a study and released their findings and recommendations. 2 of those projects were identified that did not require long-term funding for sustainment. First, in an effort to enhance affordable and workforce housing, the county engaged in consulting services with the Virginia Center for Housing Research and Housing Forward Virginia to review legislation as it pertains to the county's ability to require and incentivize affordable housing as part of the approval process for new residential development in the county. Second, the county is currently working with Civic Plus, which is our website host, to develop a portal on our website to provide resources and information to those in the county with housing assistance needs. Additionally, the county set up a local housing choice voucher program that provides housing subsidies to families that earn more than the federal HUD income limit, but yet cannot afford safe and decent housing on their own due to economic loss as a result of the pandemic. Housing staff also provides financial education to these families. A housing specialist was also funded in order to administer this local housing choice voucher program and to coordinate with the families receiving them. Community Development Transportation Match. Due to revenue reductions during the pandemic, the local transportation match budget was reduced significantly. ARPA funds allowed priority transportation and roadway infrastructure projects to be completed despite the reduction. Social Services Nonprofit Grant Program. With fundraising initiatives canceled and an increase in demand for services, nonprofit organizations suffered greatly as a result of the pandemic. The county identified this and offered grants to local nonprofits. 12 local organizations received grants from the county's ARPA funding, totaling nearly $500,000. General Services was also involved in multiple ARPA projects. Elimination of bathroom touch points. This was actually the first project to be initiated and completed in the county under ARPA. Faucets and toilets were converted to be touch-free in county facilities in order to prevent the spread of disease. An additional generator was installed in the county's Emergency Operations Center, and there were renovations to the DMV satellite office to protect staff during the pandemic. Additionally, ADA updates were made to buildings in the government center. There was also a new limited term position, capital projects coordinator, that was hired to assist in oversight with the increased number of projects due to ARPA. Parks and Recreation and Tourism also had several ongoing projects. Work has begun to construct utility improvements at the historic Ambler House located at Jamestown Beach Event Park. Work is also being done at the outdated well to replace the outdated well at Chickahominy Riverfront Park in order to provide safe and reliable source of water for the park. And as you all are aware, there is a lot going on at the James City County Marina. A lot of that work has been completed to include structural improvements to the marina building, demolition of boat sheds, dredging, and more. Work continues to provide improvements to support a new restaurant that will be privately funded and operated, as well as projects to include improved parking, a new boat ramp, a bathhouse, additional slips, and more. 2 new limited term positions were funded in Financial and Management Services. First, a procurement specialist was hired to assist with solicitations, contract awards, and oversight with the increased demand on purchasing personnel due to the number of ARPA projects. Second, a grants and special projects analyst was hired to support the development, execution, administration, and reporting for ARPA projects and initiatives, as well as other grants and special projects. Public safety. A Connect program manager was hired by the fire department. Connect, Community Outreach Network, Educate, Care, Thrive, aims to reach out to individuals in the county who are in need of supportive services. This program serves to connect citizens and their caregivers with appropriate resources to aid and support individualized needs in the home. The program started in 2018 as a collaboration between social services, fire EMS, and police to address the impact on first responders due to an increase in senior and disabled residents utilizing emergency services for non-emergency reasons. Referrals to the Connect program increased significantly due to the pandemic. Additionally, ARPA funds were utilized to pay salary increases and incentive payments to public safety personnel to help address the significant staffing shortages due to recruitment and retention challenges. Information Resources also received funding to support replacement of the current county phone system. It is an outdated system and it is no longer made, therefore parts are not readily available. Additionally, funding was provided for fiber optic cabling maintenance to meet modern high-speed demands. And finally, just under $400,000 remains in a contingency account and has not been allocated to any projects at this time. Over the course of the project period, funds were transferred in and out of the contingency account as projects were completed under budget and/or unforeseen or unexpected expenses arose. With that, I'm happy to take any questions, or if Mr. Stevens or Ms. McCarthy have anything to add, I'd welcome that as well.
Chair, members of the board, I would just add, I think Stephanie did a phenomenal job of summarizing where we are. All of these projects, well, all of this list is what you saw at the beginning of our ARPA spreadsheet. She has built off of that, so you sort of have an update of where we have money programmed for today. I think she's done a phenomenal job of sort of tracking that for us. We still show a balance and maybe some projects in limbo that have not been awarded, and that is some of what she alluded to, that we would come back to you so that we don't return any of this money when the time frames expire. We will have it all encumbered somewhere so that our residents benefit from that. And Ms. McCarthy and Stephanie are really carrying that forward for us.
Can I just ask a question about the relative proportion of the funding that is going to things that we would have had to do anyway?
I think a significant part of those things are things you would have done anyway. I think so. To your point, it has benefited the community having those funds available to us. Some of the positions that initially might have started because of the influx of this funding, we probably need to continue anyhow, and that will be something we talk about. And some of those are recommended to be funded in our current year budget to carry those forward. But it really is the ongoing needs, and we might not have started those positions when we did if this money had not become. So we might have been a little early in a few of them, but the other projects, I can't think of anything significant we wouldn't have done. Maybe the nonprofit grant program, we might not have ramped that up so great. Anything else that comes to mind from your side that maybe we would not have done?
I just wanted to stick a pin in that from the perspective that these are things that are important to the community and that we had the opportunity to undertake maybe on an advanced measure, but they are things that we would need to move ahead with anyway.
Correct.
Yeah. Great, thank you.
I've got a couple, and I'm gonna tag on with John on that one as far as, I've heard people, some of the stuff that is in this list. Why are you doing this? Why are you doing that? And I says, well, these aren't coming out of the general fund. And I think that's what a lot of people don't understand. They think everything comes out of the general fund, and it's because of my taxes is the reason that you're able to do this. And this is $14.8 million, roughly 12 to 13 cents on the tax end of it, if it was a tax increase to do these items, that we're able to do them without a tax increase. We're able to do them with outside of our general funds. We're able to do them because of this money that's available, and we're trying to utilize that money as well. So I think that citizens, need to know that this is extra and above all the others. The other 37 million is probably part of that 37 million total, but that's a big savings to the citizens. And I know we're going through a process right now. We're going to see it later on where we land with the budget and that sort of thing, and what's going on. But I think there's a lot of things we do in James City County, staff, that we do in James City County in order to make sure that we're saving the citizens as much as we can save them. And it's easy to get upset and worried and worked up on it and think, well, you're not doing anything but taxing the heck out of me, and that's all I'm doing is paying tax. I'm getting nothing. But if you go on this list and think of all these things, our citizens are basically going to get free that we're not paying and your taxes aren't paying for. I think that's very important. Question number 2, the compensation adjustment, and I'm all for that, but is that a reoccurring or is that a one-time item?
That was a one-time item. It was funded, I believe, the second half of FY22, and then it was that was picked up by the general fund after that.
Okay.
But yeah, so I believe it was 6 months, 6 or 9 months.
Right.
Yeah.
So it is a reoccurring. We got it started with this, but then it's going to the general fund. I know I'll get questions on that.
Yes, in FY24, that was picked up by the general fund. So yes, I'm sorry, I misunderstood.
Okay.
It is ongoing, but the ARPA funding to support that is complete. It's now under the general fund.
Right.
As of FY24.
Okay. And because most of the items that we're doing are like a one-time, we can buy these things or do these things and move us forward, and it's a one-time thing. So I know somebody will pick that up somewhere and call me and say, well, now you've added more cost, but we haven't. We've just, the cost we were going to incur, we didn't have to pay the initial part of it. That was covered under this, but we'd have that cost anyhow as we move forward if we want to keep our employees and if we want to keep our community safe. And I'd soon keep our community safe. Thank you.
Thank
Yes,
you.
ma'am, that's all.
Any further questions? So, it sounds you were brought in to do this, but then you've taken on additional, so you will be staying past, okay, I'm just checking. Because $37 million, looking over, managing that kind of grants, that sounds like a very important position. So, all right, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. That brings us to fiscal year 2025-26 budget. And, Okay, I wasn't sure if, okay, are you gonna, we have got Sharon and Cheryl Holland.
Did Jim have anything?
Mary McCarthy, yes. Oh,
I know, it's easy.
yes. Mr. Eisenhower, did you have anything?
Yes, ma'am.
With the previous one? Because unfortunately, you're just gonna probably have to just yell.
No, that's fine. Most of what I was going to maybe ask questions about, it was already brought up by my fellow board members.
But any questions he had have been answered.
Okay,
or
okay,
asked.
thank you. I appreciate it.
Okay.
All right.
Good
Thank you,
evening
Ms. McCarthy.
again. I'm going to get us started. With us today is Cheryl Holland. She's going to help guide the proposed budget discussion today. We have some information to share with you and also a couple opportunities to dive into some further details. She and I are sitting at a table today just so we have ease of our budget books and can help flip through and answer any questions that may come up through the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman, members of the board. I'm Cheryl Holland. I'm the budget manager for the county, and this afternoon I'll provide updates on the fiscal year 2025 budget. To begin, I'll provide a brief overview of the process, how we arrived here. Then I'll go over the more significant components of the proposed budget, followed by a discussion of potential scenarios regarding where we can go from here. And I will need the, excuse me. So to start off, this slide goes over the budget process, which officially begins in September, but departments are hard at work determining their needs long before that point. Departments start submitting their capital improvement requests and their personnel needs in October. Then in December, FMS opens the financial systems for departments' operating requests, their non-personnel items, as well as a portal for requests from outside agencies who partner with the county and that the county supports. During this time, the fall and early winter, FMS and HR hold preliminary meetings with departments to go over what they plan to request and to better understand their needs. We discuss strategies for efficiencies, prioritization, and how to arrive at a cost-effective approach to meet their needs. FMS also provides training to departments so that they know all aspects of the budget process. I'll note that the county uses a method known as zero-based budgeting, which means that departments start with nothing and then have to build their requests from there, line by line. The budgets are typically prepared by department staff and then are reviewed by the individual department heads. Then departments meet with FMS, HR, and county administration to go through their requests in February. FMS and county administration also meet to review the outside agency requests with input from the departments that partner with those agencies. In March, after these reviews and with guidance from the board and county administration, we balance the revenues and the expenditures and we prepare the proposed budget document. We're currently in April when the public hearings, community meetings, and business meetings are held, and we go over the proposed budget. We receive additional feedback from the public and the board at that time. And then lastly, the budget is scheduled for adoption in May.
Can I just stop there for one second and highlight a point that you made, Ms. Holland, and that is that you do engage in zero-based budgeting. We had a number of questions raised at the public forums on whether or not we did that, and I wanted to make it clear to people that, yeah, we expect that we justify the ongoing expenditures of each department.
Absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
Provide some highlights on this particular proposed budget. FY25 is the first year of the two-year budget, and it is the only year that is appropriated for spending. The FY25 proposed budget incorporates the strategic plan, goals, and initiatives, providing funding to support these efforts, and the total budget across all funds is $289.3 million, and that excludes inter-fund transfers. The proposed budget for the general fund, where the county's main operating activity takes place, is $254.5 million. And there is no change in the real estate or personal property tax rates. The proposed budget includes funding for investments in county staff retention and compensation, as well as increased funding for the Williamsburg-James City County School Division's request to support teacher and staff pay raises. This proposed budget excludes $9 million of requests that were received and made it to the review process that I mentioned on the previous slide. This means that FMS, HR, or county administration looked at these requests and determined they could not be met with the resources available. The items on this slide reflect the primary changes between the FY24 adopted budget and the FY25 proposed budget. In other words, how the increase in general fund revenue was allocated among expenditures. We've talked about some of these items. The first one, $5.2 million, was the increase in the contribution to the schools for their operations. $11.2 million were some of the personnel initiatives, including new positions, conversion of part-time to full-time positions, the implementation of a compensation study, a general wage increase, enhanced employee benefits, as well as a retirement contribution mandated by VRS. There was also $3.8 million that went to increase our transfers to capital projects and debt service to support those funds. $1.2 million went to increase in departmental operating costs, including professional services, software, and vehicle replacements. And then there was $789,000 which went to increases in the contributions to outside agencies. $692,000 went to increases to transfers to other funds, which are our social services fund or housing fund, to support their programs, as well as $212,000 that went to the increase in curbside recycling costs, the county's curbside recycling costs. So this is where the proposed budget currently stands, but there have been questions about these allocations, about the increase in general fund revenue, and also about the budget document itself. I'll now go over some of those questions and how we can potentially address them. First, the budget includes a use of fund balance in several areas. The county has policies regarding how fund balance can be used and how much fiscal liquidity or unassigned fund balance we should maintain in the general fund. To help clarify the use of fund balance in the FY25 adopted budget, staff has created new breakdowns, and you can see them in handouts that were provided, and these are labeled detailed changes in fund balance. There should be 2 pages for that. The first page provides a breakdown of fund balance for major funds, which are the general fund and the capital projects fund, as well as an aggregate total of non-major funds. This breakdown goes through fund balance as of the end of FY23, a projection for FY24, and the impacts of fund balance based on proposed FY25 and planned FY26 activity. For general fund, there's also information on projected unassigned fund balance compared to the county's policy on fiscal liquidity. So this first page is proposed to be added to Section A of the adopted budget document, which includes a number of our financial summaries of the budget.
And one thing I wanted to add, the purpose of this spreadsheet, it was based on some of the feedback that we had received, particularly in relation to our general fund. The Code of Virginia requires that we adopt a balanced budget, meaning revenues must equal expenditures. So what we've tried to do here and what was added and different in this section is we started with our general fund's fund balance, but then we subtracted out that portion which has already been assigned for other uses. So you start with $113.5 million, which is the number we reported to you at the end of our fiscal year 23 audit. However, some of that money was earmarked in this year, fiscal year 2024's budget, for CIP and other one-time expenditures. So not all of that $113.5 million is available. We've subtracted that out to get us to $79.2 million. That's what's truly available to be spent at your leisure. We also have a fiscal policy, however, that says we have to save 15% of that for a reserve fund. And so it's really the difference between those two numbers that would be available for spending in this year's budget. We do not typically budget any of that in the general fund. We do not want to spend fund balance on recurring expenditures. So typically, if we utilize that, our recommendation to the board is that we utilize that for capital or other one-time needs. So that's what this page is trying to demonstrate and show really what's available for spending. And then also in the major fund aggregates, the next page that we're going to present to you gives a little bit more detail on that.
Yes, and going into that second page, this covers the detailed changes in our non-major funds, which include debt services, the Virginia Public Assistance Fund, also known as social services, as well as housing and a few other funds. The distinction between a major and non-major fund for budgeting purposes depends really on the size of the fund's budget. General fund is always a major fund, and we also present our capital projects fund as a major fund. All other non-major funds are presented, their detail information is is presented in Section E of the budget document, and this is where we would propose adding this particular breakdown. And as Sharon noted, it is going through the total fund balance that was in our FY23 financial statements for these particular funds, and then it goes into the planned uses either as part of the FY24 adopted budget or in the FY25 proposed or FY26 plan.
So that information, as it was previously presented, was in accordance with GFOA and what our technical authority says we have to disclose. What we're attempting to do here is provide a little bit more detail so that you can see that aggregate number broken down by fund and see which funds are we using fund balance in. There may be some funds we're not using any fund balance, but there are other funds we may be using a substantial portion of their fund balance. And then we want to explain to you why we're recommending that. Typically, you don't want to spend fund balance unless you have to, unless you're deliberately planning to use it for a one-time expenditure. So that's what we're attempting to do here, is show you where we're proposing it be used and for what purpose we're proposing it be used for.
Another area of discussion with the FY25 budget is the real estate tax rate. There was a reassessment, and this slide provides information on the number of parcels and the change in assessed value related to that reassessment. The real estate tax rate in the proposed budget is at 83 cents, and the rate that would result in the same amount of real estate tax as last year, FY24, would be roughly 68 cents, and that would pretty much offset the increase in real estate tax related to the assessment. The increase in real estate tax related again to the reassessment, as you can see here, is 18.06%, but the increase in general fund revenue overall was closer to 10.1%, and that is because real estate is not the only source of revenue for the county's general fund. With all of that information, I'll now turn things over to Mr. Stevens to go over a handout that the board received on potential budget reductions.
Chair, members of the board, any questions of, at this point, budget-wise or comments? I did have a list I'd share with you. I don't have a detailed presentation other than just talking through some of those. As we had said before, every 1 cent on the tax rate is about $1.3 million in revenue to the county. We will certainly live with whatever we believe the community or you believe the community can support. But I would tell you that what is listed here, I believe, is needed. So anything we cut, I think, are taking away from departments believe they need that position or service or study. And again, we shorted or didn't fund $9 million in requests and a little more from the school division as they submitted, I believe, a request to us as we released the proposed budget. So I won't tell you we can't do it. We can, but it just comes at a cost. And I think that's some of the discussion I'd like to have today is initially what kind of comments or thoughts you have, where would you like to be, and do these reductions make sense if in fact you talk about a reduction?
I've got a couple on the fund balance. So I just make sure I'm getting this right. The unassigned fund balance of for 2023 was 34 million roughly and some change. 2024 is about well, it's exactly the same. That's then what is conveyed in the next sheet that shows where it's being spent. Is that correct? Because we're saving the unspent 34,000. We're keeping that for our 15%.
And so just to break that down a little bit, that 79.2 million is actually the unassigned fund balance. So it's starting with that 113.5 million.
Right.
That is total fund balance for the general fund. And then that next $34.3 million, that reflects anything that's non-spendable, committed, assigned, that's already been dedicated to those particular purposes. So unassigned fund balance is that 79.2.
And then to leave us with the 15%, is the 44.4,
yes.
And then that for the unassigned is 34.
Exactly.
And is that what is on this sheet showing what we're using that for, or is that available funds that
above and beyond the what is recommended by policy. Our target is 15%, which
Right.
is that 44.4, and so that 34.7 has not been allocated to the other funds, which are reflected on the second page. It is just meant to be used for other purposes as determined, and that's why we're proposing uses in FY25 and FY26 to be using part of that 34.
Do you know how much in that is, that 34 is going to be used roughly?
Yes, in the 5-year CIP plan, it's roughly 22 million.
Okay.
This sheet does show above that orange box, there's a line that says plan use transfer to capital projects fund.
Okay.
And you can see in 25, we're using about 12.7 million. In 26, we're spending another 2.6. What you can't see are those other 3 years of the CIP plan. And those additional 3 years is how we come back to using a total of 22 million.
So if we continue on the path we're on, that's still going to give us, just with my math, about 12 million left over.
You've got it. And that also assumes we don't add anything to it
Right.
in the next several years. If we have any surpluses, we would add to that.
And it, just in that alone, that 12 million is roughly 10 point some cents
Correct.
on our tax base.
That's right.
Okay. That's what I'm just thinking is, where are the areas that, trying to figure out the areas that the citizens are asking for, but also keep us on track with, because the citizens are asking us both things. Keep the quality of life, keep doing what you're doing, protect the land, give me some parks, recs, libraries, police, fire, and EMS. But don't raise my taxes, my gosh, don't, whatever you're doing. And so, trying to figure out, okay, because the only thing we can change is that 83 cents. A lot of people think we can go in there and now your house is valued at $650,000 and it was $500 2 years ago, and they think we mysteriously up here can change that. It's a state law that we can't change, and that's in the assessor's office. Has nothing to do. This board does not control what goes on there. It's totally separate from this board. Okay, that helps out a little bit as far as, with us trying to work through these things. And are we in open discussion? Can I keep going, or
Sure.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
And I noticed there's, that's one area that we can look at as far as, we still got our 15%. When I started, we were at, I think, 12. We bumped it to 14. We bumped it to 15, which is a good nest egg. We've done, staff and the board has done very well as far as protecting the community and having a good nest egg. That's some funding there that I think that we could return back to the citizens without affecting our county administrator's budget and where he's going with what he's trying to put in place and what he's hearing from the citizens. In the CIP and, let's see, page D5, I noticed on the capital improvements and that sort of thing, I'm very leery on, and I know we're going to continue, and schools are always a touchy thing. So this school discussion that I'm coming up with has nothing to do with teachers, teacher raises, staff, none of that. CIP, buildings, and things that are going on there. And until, in my humble opinion, until the mayor and city council decide what they're going to do and where we are and how we're landing on this, which we've been waiting on this decision for quite a while, and to me it's very frustrating. I think that we need to hold the funds, as many as we can, in some of these projects like Matthew Whaley. I think that's a new roof. I need to look. I think the
It's
first
HVAC.
HVAC. Okay. If that necessarily has to be totally done, because I know we talked about it, if whatever money we put in, we're going to get back out. Well, in my business, until I get that money in the bank, I don't have any of that money. So that's the way I look at it. And being blindsided originally, as Chair and I were in that meeting, with, we're gonna maybe do our own thing. It worries me spending, now if it needs HVAC, I'm all for it. You know, but if it doesn't have to be replaced and can put a Band-Aid on it, which we can, a lot of them, I do this for a living, we can with a lot of things, and push it out 2 or 3 years. I'm not saying it won't get replaced, but it may be that I'm protecting James City County. That's what I'm worried about. And I'm worried about our students and all that. I know it's a touchy situation with schools and people get excited but nothing, I don't want to see not having AC and not having heat and all that. So I'm not advocating for that. What I'm advocating is, can a repair be made? We're doing it on these buildings here because we're going to build a new building, and we're just patching and repairing what we need, and we're not going to go in depth of remodeling this building or one other when we're going to build a new complex. If we're going to build a new school, we need to look at it that way as well. Berkeley, you know, there's $4 million at Matthew. At Berkeley, there's 1.1 million. Division wide, and I got to look those numbers up. I didn't have time to go over each one. That's 5.8. Bus replacements, that's 8.4 in the next 5 years, not just this 1 year. But I would like to slow down on that and go, wait a minute, what is our agreement? And, you know, and you can't say, well, whatever we put in it to, we're going to get 90% out. Well, I'd much rather hold off and fix what we need to fix. And this may put pressure on the city to figure out what they're going to do so we can move forward. And I think a little pressure sometimes, the meal turns out a lot better and cooks a lot quicker. So I think we need to.
May I say something?
Yes, ma'am.
So this has been brought up by numerous board members because we don't know the shape that the Matthew Whaley AC is in, because that's, I believe, what, so I know we have an agreement with the city now, which explains why for Matthew Whaley, for instance, we're paying basically $3 million, and the city's picking up $343,000. So if there were to be an immediate need, I think we would have to do an addendum to what we are, considering where we are, not knowing what is going to happen. So we can't do business as usual, because if they decide that they're going to split and take Matthew Whaley with them, and then we've replaced the, you know, it puts us in a very, very tough spot for Cooleyfield, Berkeley, and Matthew Whaley. So I think we definitely have to have further discussion with them on that.
And you know, Chair, members of the board, however you want to go, I think it's not a bad discussion to have. I do worry a little if we start saying until it's all decisions are made,
Right.
we're not going to fund projects in the city. Then we put kids maybe at risk,
Right.
because these projects are many years in the making. And I don't want to say that if their boiler or their HVAC goes
Right.
out that they can fix it in a week, because I just don't know.
Right.
I do think an agreement that would sort of protect our investment in their facilities and their and ours. I mean, they're going to be I don't mean tested. They're going to have to put money up first for pre-K. It is further along. We expect to award that project in the next 6+ months. So we will need their $4 million for that project before they will need our $3 million for these. But I still think having that agreement, those concerns you have, if I were on the city council side, I might have some of those same concerns. So whether we take them out of our CIP, certainly we could do that, or whether we have an agreement that would cover our investment so that what we put in, if in fact we end up separate independent divisions, we get back our dollar for dollar. They would expect to get back their money, I think, dollar
Sure.
for dollar too. But whichever
Right.
direction you want to go, I just don't know if it could be a multi-year process of
Well, that's why,
wondering.
because if they're Band-Aiding their AC already and they're in bad shape, we don't want to certainly make people suffer. But then that's why I think you have to step in with some sort of another, and I would think they would understand that just as we would, their share on our side. But, you know, I mean, just to put it into perspective, you know, in Matoka in 26, if funded, we would be putting 3.7 million. They would be putting in 428,000. So it's
Significant.
yes. So I think that we definitely discussion prior to the budget being approved.
The only thing I'd say here is that partly it's a question of when during the fiscal year we would be making a determination about, or the schools would be going out to bid on that particular project. Hopefully, the city will have come to a conclusion sometime close to the end of the fiscal year this year, and we can figure things out from that point. I am reluctant to kind of pull this out of the CIP at the moment, and really would just kind of make that determination as we go beyond to the actual point at which we're perhaps more informed about what's going to happen. So I just put that out there.
Or what their plan, because surely they have thought about, I mean, they've seen the CIP, so I imagine they would think that there wouldn't be a lot of enthusiasm on our part to spend that kind of money on 3 projects that we may not recoup. So I would think they would have also had a discussion. So at least where are we?
Yeah, and the city manager and I at least had a conversation. It didn't lead to an agreement at this point, but again, his view was they were doing business as usual, because for me, the concern is, are they going to pay the almost $4 million toward pre-K? And then are they going to pay us? And then my concern going forward is, are we going to pay this much and then have that invested in their schools that we don't recoup? So I do think it's a valid concern on both sides, and whether it's by separate agreement or whether we just delay, I think it will really look to you which way or what's most comforting. I just worry it could have a multi-year impact, and I don't know. We could push back and say, is this one really necessary? Is this one really necessary? My hope is they're going to tell us, yes, they're all very imminent and they need to be replaced, or they wouldn't have had them in this CIP at that cost anyhow.
Sure.
They want to fix them before they absolutely fall apart, but you want to have them at the end of life for those mechanical systems as well.
Sure.
But if we're worried about that, then what I would look at, I would go, okay, with that 4 million that we're looking at city to do, well, then what we'll do is we'll take this amount out of this budget for the CIP, and the city can fund that with that 4 million on those schools, and we can take the 4 million for the pre-K in our jurisdiction and do it. And then that way there's no funds that are, well, you owe us this and I owe you that. And, it could be a clean cut and say, okay, well, let's look at it this way. If we're going to spend X amount this year on this, so, we've got on this year 3.338, so 3.4 million roughly right there alone. That's close to the 4 million right there. And if we slide down the list, it's 675, another 1.2 million, 1.5 million. And, so if we were to say, okay, we'll pay, while we're figuring this out, we'll pay for the bright beginnings and early childhood, the classrooms there. Y'all take care of these others at Matthew, Whaley, and all. And a fair exchange is no robbery. So, and that would keep it clean. And then I could go back to the citizens that will look at this and go, well, wait a minute, why are you putting that money into Williamsburg? Why are you putting my money into Williamsburg and not knowing if you're going to get a dime out? Put my money into James City County while this is going on and let them put their money in theirs. We're still the same amount. We both, equal it out. And, and I just think it'd be cleaner, it'd be fair, and I'm not asking for this to come out of the CIP. I'm asking for it to be a hold and not be spent. And, it's just, I just think I'm not going to vote for something of this that's going into here. I'll tell you right now, I will not vote on this, going through this to CIP to end up going to Williamsburg and supporting that without knowing we're gonna have support on ours. And I think we ought to spend the 4 million here and let them spend 4 million there.
But I don't particularly want to turn the heat up on the issue. And if we have a sense that the preschool funding is going to come first in this order, I guess I don't see the problem with making that determination once the decision's made on their part.
So it sounds like we need to have a conversation, because when we sat through the study, what I heard was that Matthew Whaley was possibly going to be a little bit overcrowded because of pre-K to 5th. So we want to make sure that they are still 100% in with being in Bright Beginnings with us, right? And that we're going to get, so that's one piece of the puzzle we have to answer. And then we need to discuss this, because with all due respect, well, sure, I'd want business as usual too if somebody else was picking up 90% of the money. So we really need to kind of work through those two things. And I know we're in a little bit of we've got a couple weeks here, but I do think that's a conversation that we do need to pursue. Okay. And then maybe we can discuss further how we want to address that. And so I want Jim or Barbara, if you want.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'd like to put my 2 cents in. I have some of the same concerns. When you look at the CIP for fiscal 25, the 3 projects in the city for the HVAC and Matthew Whaley, the roof at Berkeley and the turf at Cooley is about 4.5, a little over $4.5 million that we're putting in, and about 500,000 that the city's putting in. At the same time, if I were in the city, I'd have the same kind of concerns about the amount that they're putting into our schools, if you will, Laurel Lane, Norge, Blayton, Hornsby, and especially the pre-K. They're putting in $664,500 into the pre-K. They got about $845,000 that they'd be putting into schools that are in James City County. From our perspective, our 4.5 million, less their 845,000, we're still about $3.5 million of money net over what they're putting into our schools that we're putting into the 3 in the city. And I'm a little reluctant to do that, especially if, we don't know what the direct impact is going to be. Is the HVAC about ready to fall apart? Will it be able to squeeze out one more year with intermittent maintenance? What are the options? If we were going to defer it, I would look at deferring it for about 1 year until we have a better feel for what's going to really happen with our school system, because it's a huge impact on us. Even if they decided, if we decided we didn't want to fund the stuff in their jurisdictions, and they decided they didn't want to fund the stuff in our jurisdictions, we still come out about $3.5 million a hit, assuming that we pick up what we have to spend that they would normally have spent in our jurisdiction. So I think that I'm a little reluctant to commit to a budget that we don't know the answers to these questions yet. So between now and the time we do this in a couple of weeks, we're going to have, I think, some more discussions with them and get better information back to the board.
Well, and Chairman, maybe it is us coming up with some projects to move forward that are more, the balances out, keeps them in the CIP, but move projects from next year, from 26 into 25, that are county schools, and sort of balance it out and have it that way. If you're more comfortable with that, I don't want to have I'm just concerned we'll have a hard time coming to an agreement with the city in the next 3 or 4 weeks. And I'd rather not let the budget be stopped by that. I will say and Ms. McCarthy needs to clarify if I'm wrong, but on your operating budgets, once we approve those, we really are obligated to forward that money as the school division makes the request for those funds. On the CIP, we historically have had a little more control over those projects moving forward and not just automatically sending the funding to the school. So I think we have some more control over that, but you could adopt the budget with projects swapped, and if we get to July 2nd and the world has come back together and we decide we're going to fund them, you could then put it back towards those projects, I think.
Well,
Yeah, I was just going to add to that. The schools do utilize our procurement department as well, so we know fairly early in the process when they're starting to look to certain projects and the timeline and that type of thing, and we can certainly provide that information back to you as well.
because we could approve the operating budget if we got there on the 14th and push the CIP to the next one, right? If we had to.
The
Well, we could always-
difficulty in that is the transfer from our operating budget to CIP, and that number would change based on projects that are allocated.
Okay.
We could always amend the budget that we'd adopted, though, and that would be a way of accomplishing the same
Depending on the
objective, right?
extent it's amended, you might have to do another public hearing. It would depend on the magnitude.
Right.
And, you know, I like,
I just want to see if
So-
Ms. Knoll wants, Ms. Knoll, do you want to speak?
No, I just had a question. On page D5, capital improvement programs, keeps saying that the city will owe $4 million. It says 664,000.
I think that's because there was, in the previous year's CIP,
Oh, the
most of-
previous,
the
okay.
bulk of the funding
Okay,
came.
because I was confused, because it shows us
Yes.
doing 5.8 million and them doing 664. Okay, so that doesn't add up to what the number was being thrown around. Okay.
Yeah, I think the only thing that worries me about what you say about pushing things forward, and I think it depends on what the answer is about the AC. That's what I'm worried about. But then again, I'm not comfortable until we have some sort of an agreement. So I want to have some sort of agreement. So
We may have the ability to approve a dollar amount for school-related projects and determine between now and June 30th which actual projects they would be.
Okay.
That is something we could look into.
thank you.
Can I ask a couple of questions? If that's
Go ahead.
Okay. So the first question I had really was about the school funding and the money in the operating budget that's devoted to school, excuse me, funding. Is that based on the legislature's initial budget, the governor's budget, which?
Well, we do have an agreement with the schools, and so they do develop their request based on what they know of the state's anticipated funding, federal funding anticipated, and then they give a locality need to the city of Williamsburg as well as the county. They also provide us with their annual enrollment as of September 30th, and according to our agreement with the city and the schools, we review the enrollment annually, go through line by line of 12,000 students and remove any non-residents that aren't part of the city, aren't part of the county, exclude those, and then there are a few other exclusions that we make. So we get a pure city number and a pure county number of how many students there are, and we apply a calculation there to arrive at it's for the FY25 proposed budget, it's 10.27% is the city's portion, and then 89.73 is the county's portion of that funding. But it is all then we go through, and I don't have the page number in front of me, but the local contribution to the schools, we compare that to what the Department of Education has said is what their standards of quality are, and right now. The state says that we would have needed to have funded 39 million, but the county's contribution is actually 96.5 million.
In the original number that was requested by the school division, it was based on the governor's budget that was released in December. They have provided updates to us in the recent months, and our most recent number that's reflected in the proposed budget is based on the most recent General Assembly approved budget. But of course, they're still going through the process, and the state has not adopted its budget, so it may change.
Right, and that's the point that I wanted to understand better. So As I understand it, there was about a $350 million difference between what the legislature approved and what the governor had proposed. That we're kind of unsure where that number is going to land, but the schools feel confident that this is what they need.
They received a calculation tool from VDOE based on the General Assembly's budget in March, and that did provide about $4 million of additional funding, and that revised their request of us to them. It's based on that information. However, there are quite a few bills, as you know, that are still in limbo and working their way through, so the ultimate number certainly may change.
I mean, my sense is that it's going to wind up with that higher number, but I just want to know where whether there's going to be any big surprise waiting for us on May 14th, since they're meeting on May 13th in Richmond.
Yes.
Yeah.
We are waiting with you.
So that's one part. Another part of the question I have. So I want to just put on the table the fact that I think the county administrator has produced a very defensible budget, and I support the priorities that he's put forward. I think it makes great sense to us. Where I would like to have some sense of the possibilities is, and I know we've seen some material from Mr. Kinsman, and we've discussed this issue in past years, but I think the 83-cent tax rate is something that we need to have, but as a one-time rebate, whether there might be some room for an offset of some of that tax bill for the coming fiscal year from some undesignated fund balance that would make it more acceptable to folks who are very concerned about the high rate of increase. Would that be something that would work? Would it have negative consequences, since it would be a one-time? I mean, I would not favor lowering the rate. I'd favor a rebate for the year that would offset some of the impact of that rate.
My understanding through some conversations with Mr. Kinsman is we do have the ability to do that. It would require an ordinance to provide that authority to our board. Other localities have done that. Typically, they're doing it in the form of a credit as opposed to a rebate. The only difference between the two is rebate means we're cutting checks, whereas a credit is a deduction to the check. Yes, credit is better administratively, and obviously the citizen receives that discount sooner as well. My understanding on how it typically works is it's based on a surplus from a prior year. We're obviously in fiscal year 2024. We don't know at this point in time what our surplus may be. However, we do know what our surplus was last year for fiscal year 2023. So the implementation of that program would require that those that paid taxes last year and were part of contributing to that surplus would receive the benefit of it. And then the devil's in the details in terms of, do you want it as a percentage, say a 5% credit, something along those lines. We also bill semi-annually. So is it something we'd want to do for the June and December bills, just December bills, those types of things we would need to talk through. But it can't be done.
Right. Okay. I just want to put that on the table as something for us to think about as a possibility.
I have a question, Sharon. Initially, the school board asked for 3% raise, and then they raised it to 4.5. Does that include the 2% that you're going to get from the state, or no?
That's all inclusive.
It's what?
That's all inclusive.
It is inclusive. 6.
Yes. The 4.5%
4.5
includes
is
the money
all-inclusive.
they
Okay.
receive from the state.
Thank you.
I think the superintendent had proposed the 3% from what I understand.
Right.
And then the school board then came back with the larger ask, from what I gathered from watching their meeting, because they simply have been unable to retain, they're losing staff for a couple of $1,000s to other localities right next door. So that's why they came back.
I was just curious as to whether the 4.5 didn't include the 2 percentage points from the state. but it does. So that was
Right.
the question.
For the SOQ positions only?
Yes.
You're making up
Yes.
the rest?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
If I could just clarify
that's right.
on
I
school
apologize.
funding, we shorted them about 600,000 as we produced the proposed budget. That was for additional health care dependent coverage costs. So they requested that. We did not fund that. But it seemed like there was an additional request the day we were publishing our budget. So do you have the number for how much we are not funding?
There
that
was a
they've
little
asked
bit
for?
of a difference. At the time we received their revised request to incorporate into our proposed budget, we utilized an additional $4 million that the state was going to receive, the schools were going to receive from the state. That $4 million was a rough estimate. When they received the calculation tool from VDOE, it was $3.6 million, so there was a $400,000 difference there, and that helped to contribute to that gap. They did come back with an additional request of about $550,000 for the health insurance contribution, and also a conversion of a part-time to a full-time bilingual specialist. Those items were not included in our number.
So I had asked for a list because the county administrator had given us a list of things that had been requests that had been done, but he did not choose to fund. And I'd asked for that from the schools a few weeks ago, and I don't think we've ever received it, have we? It didn't make its way into my inbox yet.
I have not received anything official. It's my understanding that they just recently briefed their board on that list as well, and that it should be coming to us at some point this week.
Okay, because I know they specifically asking for the health care, but it's really just us giving an amount of money, because they don't have to put that towards health care. They decide, just so people are not confused, we give the money, and then they decide, at least at this point in the game, the way it works between the two bodies, they decide how they're going to expend that. So,
that's correct.
Okay. So, Mr. Eisenhower, would you like to speak?
Yes, if you don't mind. I'm a little, take a little bit different approach, I think, than Dr. McGlennon, and I sort of want to go off into this document that was given to us about potential areas to consider for budget reductions. There were about 6 or 7 or 8 items that totaled about $2.8 million if you got down to before the compensation study. That I think we're sort of in the order of priority. If I'm incorrect, Mr. Stevens, let me know. But I think that was your recommendation as starting in priority down that list of things to make reductions in the first 8 or so that got us down to about 2.86 million. Were the ones that you would recommend first? Is that correct?
Yes, sir. That is correct.
Okay. When I got to the one about the compensation study, you had indicated that you could cut by delaying it, I guess, till October 1st, you could cut 1.3 million out of this next year's budget. But then the one thing I really wanted to understand a little bit that I really didn't understand was right below it, 2.94, almost 2.95 million transfer to capital projects funds. That's a transfer from the operating general fund budget to capital. Where would those reductions of 2.9 million be made in the CIP?
Mr. Eisenhower, I will push on Ms. Hall and Ms. McCarthy to correct me. I do believe that increase is relative to our 5% policy to send money to the CIP. And so you could not follow that policy, and then reductions in the CIP would have an impact on your general fund. But at this point, that is the increase based on the new general fund budget. So as the general fund budget reduces, that 5% transfer will reduce. I did provide a list of CIP projects that you could talk about $6 million worth of projects that you could reduce, but it doesn't have any real impact on the operating ongoing costs for our revenue. And so it doesn't really help dollar for dollar.
Right. Yeah.
In that.
Yeah. What I was trying to drive at was that wanted to make sure that if we did, let's say, those first group down through overtime that was down to 2.81, you're looking at probably about a little over 2 cents on the tax rate.
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then we could potentially do, in addition to that, we could do a rebate because we have, I guess, and I'm going to ask Ms. McCarthy to maybe clarify for me a little bit, because I was under the impression that if we had any previous year's surpluses that were held in the general fund, that we could do a rebate using those. But it sounds like what she was telling us a few minutes ago is that it has to be based upon the FY24 anticipated FY24 budget surplus. That would be all we could do. Is that correct, or do we have the ability to go back and capture any of that other to use for a credit?
I'll let Mr. Kinsman correct me if I don't speak correctly on this, but my understanding is it has to be based on a known surplus. And because we're still in fiscal year 2024, we don't know that number at this stage. We still have several months to go. However, we do know our surplus from fiscal year 2023, and that was roughly $13 million. So that's what would be available to credit back.
Okay. Okay, that's what I wanted to try to get a feel for, because what I'm hearing from my constituents, is I think that there's some concern about the 83-cent tax rate. I think we have probably the ability to nudge it down a couple of cents, but I think that beyond that, I would be interested in trying to give an additional bit of relief through the credit for this next fiscal year, which is just a one-time type of thing, as Ms. McClendon had indicated. But the combination of the two would probably give the ability to maybe do up to a combined 4 or 5 cent reduction for our citizens for this year, to help ease it into it the following year. But that's sort of what I would like to have the board consider looking at, because I appreciated the ability to look at some of these projects that staff thought we might have the ability to maybe make some small cuts in the tax rate for this year.
Question.
Yes.
Going back to the question on students and deciding what's in Williamsburg, what's in James City, it sounded like somewhere in that conversation there was still left a group that wasn't in one group or the other that we're instructing?
Yes, there is a group of students that are not included as part of the count between the city and county determining the allocation, and that we do support through this funding. And their neighboring localities are also students that are in type transient, staying in hotels.
Now, wouldn't they be considered wherever that hotel's located? Wouldn't that be considered, whether it's James City or whether it's Williamsburg? I would think that calculation would be, and I'm sure there's not that many. I mean, it's not like there's a huge amount probably. But I would think wherever the home is, whether it's 6 months and then they leave or whatever, that would be in that calculation for each jurisdiction, whether it's us or Williamsburg.
That information is spelled out in the contract. I guess there are certain exclusions. It is in their total enrollment number. It's just backed out of the calculation when we determine the split. My understanding is it's because they do tend to move very frequently from one location to another. It is hotels, campgrounds, staying with a relative, those types of things that they're excluded. You would, at your discretion and as part of the contract negotiations, be able to make changes to that.
Well, because some students are protected under federal law, because you have to, if a homeless student had been enrolled in our schools and they moved to Newport News, they still have the ability to come back to WJCC to receive their education. So some of it may be, but there's also some that are just simply, you may not be able to do that.
We certainly have students in the school division that don't reside in either locality.
Right.
they're a student of a teacher or an employee.
That'd be a benefit.
So sorry. Any further?
Healthcare. Let's go back to healthcare. How come we in James City County can control our healthcare to a certain extent and keep our percentages down? And the school system seems to, I'm sure they're trying to do their best. I'm not saying they're doing a terrible job. I'm just saying, is there a way that maybe our practices of what we do, we can help the school system in order to cut their numbers down so that they're saving more money in their insurance bills?
Yeah, I certainly don't mind talking. You know, us being self-insured, we are active from a staff side. We have a good consultant helping us through, and we have some luck. I mean, it's all of that. It's good, healthy lifestyles, and it is the fact that we didn't have large claims by some number of employees. So not knowing the details of their plan, they're a similar sized group, maybe a little larger than us in terms of full-time that are insured. I think they pay for insurance versus being self-insured, although I'm not 100% of that. And so that does work in your favor. If you're paying somebody for insurance, if you have a bad year, your cost doesn't go up. If you're self-insured like us, your cost for that year can go up. So, Ms. McCarthy?
Yeah, so that is the biggest difference really, is that we are self-insured versus them being fully insured, which basically means we can adjust in real time. We are monitoring our claims. Our consultants let us know when we have an uptick in a certain type of claim. We reach out to those individuals and provide additional services on the front end to assist with some of that. I am having conversations with both the city. They're also on the local choice program, which is the state's fully insured program, along with the school division. They will likely utilize our same consultant. They have been very beneficial to us. The other thing that is really outside their control is the demographic. The demographic of a school division is very different than a demographic of, say, a local government. It's very female-oriented, and with that, traditionally, factually speaking, the costs tend to be higher. I did pursue some of this when I worked for a previous locality, and it wasn't beneficial for us to have a combined system. However, they certainly should and probably are exploring whether it makes sense for them to be self-insured versus fully insured. It does take a little time and money to get out of that. Typically, if you're in a fully insured program, it takes 12 to 18 months to fully get out of it because of the backlog of paying those claims. Let's say you terminate a contract June 30th. There are claims that had not been processed that it takes, like I said, about a year or so to work its way through the system. But the services of a consultant could help them with that and the cost benefit, and also just exploring different types of plans. I know I heard from them that they just recently have an HMO program. It's new for them, but it seems to be trending much better than the plan they've previously been using.
They talked to us about that at our school liaison.
Yes.
That they were going to go to use that.
And if it does split, that would be something I'd want to look at as we take on the school system and Williamsburg takes on theirs, is how we can help the school system. I know, Adam has talked about, the attorney side of it and all that, and helping on that and being able to, give them a benefit as far as having an attorney there during their meetings so they can ask questions and am I stepping over bounds or whatever. And, so, and at the end, it's a cost savings to our citizens. And so if we can do that, then, as we go through this process, if we end up being away from Williamsburg on this item, then we ought to look at how we can help them as far as their ability, either self-insure, join us, or, it might not be a benefit to join us as one, as it may then throw ours down. So, but maybe self-insured, and that's one thing, just like the attorney's office. Instead of paying outside, we can have it inside and save money in the long run. And every dollar, counts on this. So, thank you.
I was just going to ask about the health insurance component of the additional funding request that the schools made. Is that designed to reduce the employee share?
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay, so that would be better because obviously the health insurance costs for individual members of the staff would be the same regardless of their salary. So
So I had a question. First of all, I wanted to say that I just want to say thank you, but I want to remember that to everyone that has worked on the budget and to all the departments and everything that you've done. What's very important to me in this budget is the employee piece and the compensation and becoming competitive. And I also feel that way about the schools. I mean, we know firsthand, we heard at our community meetings about what they are struggling with, and in hopes that will go to salaries, but of which we have no control over. But the one thing I wanted to ask, and I hope this is an appropriate place to ask, and actually Supervisor McGlennon had brought it up one other time as well, is we have gotten a lot of feedback about the assessments, and again, as we've talked about it, it's based on fair market value. It's the state law code. We are a 2-year assessment. I know that there are localities that do it every year, localities that do it a longer. What would it take to do it yearly so that it wouldn't be such a if home prices stay where we are, but also if they do change, it does give you, you are getting to that quicker. If you get in a situation where they're going down, then we're able to address that by doing it yearly. What does it take to go to an every year assessment versus an every 2?
Ms. Larson, I don't have the mechanics. I think some of you have the history where we used to assess every year. I think residents every year are upset, potentially, those that have higher increases in their assessments. So we went to every 2 years. So at least when we went through the process, that was the number for a 2-year period. I will tell you our 20-some% increase in residential values is average in the region.
Right.
I know the city does it every year. Their 2-year deal is more than what ours is for this 2-year cycle. York is 2 years. Hampton is every year. So those assessments do creep up, and it does make it a little more gradual or incremental. But then you have this same discussion every year with residents whose value is increased 30 or 40%, because I think any typical year, you're going to have a part of the community that's increasing in value higher than the average. And those residents are going to be, I think, upset each time, because it does generally equate to paying more in taxes. And so we could do that. I don't know the mechanics today to getting us back to that, whether we could do it as quickly as next year, but certainly we could do an every year assessment if that's the direction the board wanted to go. We were doing that at one time. I think there is some validity to not making it quite as significant, but you're going to have those folks that are unhappy with that increase, I think, every year as opposed to every other year under the current system. So happy to pursue that and bring back out what it takes to get there.
Okay. And I do want to share that I know that one comment that I got in the community meeting, I know, for instance, we decided to not pass on the recycling and maybe some other fees, who just shared that, there's things they don't do. And so the fact that they don't recycle. So the fact that we're not increasing it for those that do isn't helping them. And, what is a way to, what would the impact? I think what is the recycle? It's about 200, right?
It's a couple $100,000.
Yeah.
The other thing that's not in the proposed budget was Parks and Rec had recommended about $500,000 in various fee increases among their programs. So again, I haven't brought that back to say we could, or we should, but it's certainly something you could do, is increase fees there as well as recycling and pass on that at a monthly cost. It probably takes the monthly cost from $7 a month to $8 or $9 a month. Okay, at least you're shaking your head. So in that range, so $1 or $2 a month
Okay.
would cover the $200,000 there. And like I said, the Parks and Rec fees were about $500,000 in additional revenue. So those could be other things that we add back in if the board would choose that as an offset, and that would either add to the number you come through in a tax reduction of some of these items on the list, or it would maybe allow some of those to remain. So I think any combination of that would work for us as well. And I will share, I know one locality recommended they were reducing their rate 3 cents. They are still getting a tremendous amount of criticism. And so a 1 or 2 cent reduction, while significant in terms of, I think, mental, what it means that you've listened some, isn't a lot of dollars on our median home. That $400,000 value home, it's about $3.50 per cent. So if you do a 2 or 3 cent reduction, it's $3 to $7 to $10 a month in terms of saving to that median value home. I won't say that's not significant, but it's probably more you listened and you did something than it really is money back to them. I think the credit idea has a potential that if you were asking me, could we do an 8 cent reduction? I would tell you, I think that would be very, very difficult for the county. If you wanted to return 7 or 8 cents in a credit, that would be a one-time expense and easier, but it still leads to a future cost to those residents at a higher tax rate potentially. So some combination of that probably makes it a little more meaningful in terms of that credit back to them versus much of a tax rate change.
More questions?
I would be curious if we could get a list of the Parks and Rec fees and a breakdown of what you mean.
Yes, ma'am, I have that.
Okay, that'd be great.
Going back to the CIP, one that I didn't call out to was Cooley Field. There's $1 million there. So that's another item that, until we figure out what's going on with the system, I want to put money into it for our teachers, our students and all that, but some of these other things I'm not for at all. Also, while I'm on the CIPs, and I saw you pulled the building energy improvements. That's on D15, and part of that out of there. But I know we did a study on all the buildings and energy efficiency 2 or 3 years ago. Are we doing another one? And if we are, which ones are we doing? And if we're gonna sell majority of them and sell this and build a new facility, I don't think we need to do an energy study on any of the buildings, because I'm sure they're not as efficient as they could be, but that new build will be.
I'll verify that.
Page D15 are projects that are already in the approved budget prior to next year. So to your point, you said we funded one a few years ago. That's what that is.
That's not current coming up.
Right, that's past. So
Okay.
page D15 is showing anything that we've approved up to right now,
Okay.
not the next 5 years.
Okay.
And Mr. Hippel, to your point, in talking with our general services staff, we would not be studying buildings that we're anticipating we wouldn't occupy in the future, and I'll verify that with them as well.
Okay, and then continuing on D16, I see playground replacement of 700,000 in FY 2025, so that's coming up.
So pages, starting on page D14 through D16 at the very top, carry forward projects.
Right.
Those are projects that were approved in previous budgets, but they're not done yet.
Right.
So here, when it says, that's the estimated completion date, but it's already funded. It's not part of what you would be approving in the next 5 years.
Okay, but if it hasn't begun, even though we funded it, because I'm looking at, we'll go down to the Williamsburg Regional Library, and I'm looking at that and what's been budgeted on that, and actual and balance, that's 1.1, and that's the library HVAC, and I'm not saying we don't need that, we probably do, but the carpet and the restrooms and library improvements and the playground, and I don't know if that's just the Williamsburg Library or that's Croker included in that. And
That would just be the library that resides in James City County.
This one's just
Correct.
the
And
Croker
the playground
Library.
itself was
Okay.
funded by their Friends of the Library,
Okay.
so that was an outside funding source.
Okay, so that's all Croker. Okay. All right, I was just checking if there's any funds there. Look under every crack we can.
I'm glad you're looking at it. That was new. We added that last year.
Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Great, thank you. Mr. Eisenhower, do you have anything further?
Yeah, the only thing I would say is that in listening to Scott's comments, I would be inclined to do a nominal reduction in the tax rate of 2 to 3 cents, whatever is workable within those figures that he had, and then to do an additional 2 to 3 cents one time as a credit for this next fiscal year. So I think I'd like to sort of see, if they could put together for us what that would look like to achieve that, so that we could have that for consideration before we make any decision. And then the second thing is, I think we need to really get a little bit better feel for what has to be done or what could be deferred as far as the schools, because until we have a decision, it's really, we're putting a whole lot of money into something that it's going to be difficult for us to understand exactly how we're going to recoup. And given how much of an increase we've had this year, that's an area really I think that we need to have better information on before we make a decision. A couple of other things that I would tell you is I've looked at in the CIP, the big unknown that is not anywhere in that 5-year CIP is what happens is if we have to build a new middle school. Because if that happens, then we're back to square one and we have to basically go back and take a look at the whole thing. So, not having a decision one way or the other about schools is what's going to be creating a complex problem for us with this budget right now.
Isnell, do you have anything?
I just, after attending all 5 town halls, everybody just kind of said, we've got to lower the tax rate, we've got to lower the tax rate. And looking on Mr. Stevens' list here of where we can lower things or take things out, if I'm correct, let me know. On the front page, you have a $4.161 million reduction possible, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Am I right? Okay. And then we go to the back page where the capital improvement plans, and under the reductions you've got suggested there is another 6.255, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
When you add those together, divide them by 1.3, that would be an 8-cent reduction in the price, down to 75 cents.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes or no?
The only challenge on the CIP is it does not reduce the impact on the general fund.
Okay.
Because it is being funded with fund balance or your policy number of sending 5% over, and that policy is your policy, but it's fairly common in localities to have 5% of your general fund go to fund CIP.
Okay.
So reducing the CIP really doesn't reduce the ongoing revenue.
So you've already reduced us by $4 million, which is 3 cents.
Yes, ma'am.
And we can just keep on looking further down.
Part of that in that $4 million does cut into the pay study implementation, which means I would do less. It's not just delaying it because, again, it is ongoing revenue or recurring expenditures. I would be hesitant to fully implement it in January, which I could do next year on less money because the next year it's a full year of it, and our revenues are not projected to grow in 26 substantially. So I do worry. I would live within the monies there on an annual basis is what I was intending to do. So that 1.3 million takes away from making us more competitive. It will get us better, but we'll still be behind neighboring localities, or at least I believe we will be.
I'm not interested in that. I'm just one person. But
well, I agree with you, and I think that one of the other pieces of information that it would be helpful to have available is, so for instance, if we delayed the implementation of the compensation plan, as you point out, the next year we would have a full year's worth of the cost of that carrying forward. And so that's why I really am reluctant to see the tax rate go down significantly. I heard a lot of comments as well, but mostly I would say I heard people saying this is a hard thing to take at one time. And I think the advantage of doing something that credits taxpayers with some reduction for this coming year, rather than significantly reducing the tax rate, puts us in a better position to make determinations when we know what the revenue situation will be like in those years, and to recognize that some of these costs that we're talking about are things that are being deferred that we will still need in the future, or things that are being reduced in terms of not affecting the entire fiscal year, but will have to be funded fully in the fiscal years coming up.
I would, if I can, I would agree. I think that if we can make these cuts that are there, but when we get down to the compensation study, I think we ought to not touch that. I think that the pay raises, the compensation study, all those kinds of things, the schools, those are really the important things that we have to put in there. We do have the ability to take about almost $3 million in that first, above that line, where we got to the compensation study, which would give us the ability for a nominal tax rate decrease. But I think maybe having slightly more from a credit standpoint as well would help. So it's just how we get there. But I think the combination of the two, being in the 4 to 5 cent range, would be helpful for all our folks to help make it through this big increase this year, and still not cut us too badly for next year.
So you've heard, did you want to say something?
Yes, ma'am. All right, well, listening to everyone, and it's the ones I didn't hear from that I worry with. It's the men and women that are out there that are on a fixed income, that are struggling, that can't make it to the meeting. Those are the ones I'm more concerned about, than the group that can still work. Now, I think we need to hold tight on our benefits and raises for our employees. That shouldn't be touched. Shouldn't be touched with the schools either, as far as the teachers and all that. I think we need to keep that. We cannot keep the quality of life and keep going what we're doing by keep cutting and cutting and cutting. And one guy told me, he said, I got a raise this year, and this item is going to take 30% of my raise. I'm like, well, you still got 70 left. Now, that's just country math to me, but I'm sitting there going, okay, well, I'm glad you were able to have that. But if we take the fund balance, the leftover piece of 12 point some million, and we add that to the 3 million that you're looking, now we're at 15 million. If we were to take that 15 and drive the rate down to say somewhere around 77 or so over the next 2 years, by that time, we're doing another assessment, and we'll see where we stand at that point. But that's gonna, we can take funds that we have, and we found areas that we can save, and take that 15 million, divide it in half, and spread it over the next 2 years. And that way it'll bring the tax rate, it'll give our citizens a little relief. It'll still allow us to do all the things that you put in the budget, which I think are very important. And I wish we had even more money to do the things that the citizens are wanting us to do. But of course, everything's a balance. So I think if we take that 15 million, divide it in half, split that over the next 2 years, and that would drive it down to around, I'm thinking about 77 with my simple math, would be our tax rate would be down to 77 cents. I know we did the last one and we took it down a penny. That's all we could do at that time. I got more people said, you might as well keep that. You sent me $20? Really? Save the money in the envelope and all that. You wasted more money in postage than you did sending me $20. And I can't blame them. I could see where they're, but we thought we were doing something to at least show them we're trying to work these numbers out. But I think the biggest thing is our employees is our biggest benefit. in this corporation or this county. And I think of it as business, and without them, we can't supply what we need for our citizens and what they demand that they have in James City County. So I would put it out if we could take that 12 and that 3, put it together for 15, drop it down to 77. You know, that would be something that maybe we could work that out or get a proposal on it just to see where that, and if that, and knowing in 2 years, you know, we'll have to look at it when the next assessments come in. And as strong as we've been, I'm sure they're going to be higher again in 2 more years. So, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. So if you could, you've gotten a couple different scenarios, maybe you could work those up, but I think you have to come back with the true impact of all of them and give this board an opportunity to continue to look that over and to come up with a decision. So does anyone want to say anything further on the budget?
Just remember the school stuff.
Pardon?
Just remember the school stuff.
Oh, yes. We won't forget that.
Okay.
No, absolutely not.
And again, I might circle, that might probably would be a good thing to get for us to get you back together once we have those before the May 14th meeting. I'm not excited about having to add a meeting to your calendar, but I do think it would probably work, and we'll work on dates. We probably need a week or so to pull it together, or a few days, and then we'll work on dates with you where we could bring that back.
I think we expect that during this time of year, so.
Whatever it takes.
We can try to be as flexible as possible.
Right.
So,
And
thank you.
Madam Chair, because any rebate would require an ordinance amendment, I've gone ahead and put that in for advertisement. So you'll see that for your public hearings. We can cancel that if you choose not to do that, but I've got to meet advertising requirements, so I went ahead and sent that in.
Would that be before, before the 14th meet, or on the 14th?
It would be on the 14th, so you would have to do that separately as part of the budget, but, so I've advertised it for that meeting.
But that would just be to allow us to do it if we chose to do it.
Right.
Yes, sir, that gives you the option.
But will it say it in the advertisement? Because I know people read it and go, oh, they're doing a rebate. Really big deal.
I believe the way I drafted it was an ordinance amendment to whatever that particular county code section was to allow the board to issue the option to do it.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you both very much. Appreciate it. Thank you, Mr. Stevens. All right. Give everybody just a moment. And that brings us to SUP 20-0010, 9537 Barnes Road, Hertzler Clearing and Grading, progress update. Christy Parrish. Good afternoon.
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the board. At its meeting on October 10th, 2023, the Board of Supervisors adopted a special use permit resolution with 20 conditions to allow for the operation of a contractor's office, warehouse, sheds, and manufacturing of sales of wood products on property located at 9537 Barnes Road. At the board's request, staff will provide an update on the progress of bringing the property in compliance with the special use permit, zoning ordinance, and other applicable county codes. In accordance with the special use permit, staff completed 2 inspections of the property. The first inspection was conducted on January 19th, 2024, and the second inspection was conducted on April 3rd, 2024. Detailed results and notes from both inspections were provided to you in your packet. For this presentation, I will highlight some of the issues identified during these inspections and an update on the owner's progress. From the zoning and planning perspective, a site plan was submitted on December 8, 2023. The first comments were issued on January 29, 2024. The second submittal has not been received, and the site plan must be approved by October 10, 2025. During the inspections, the stockpiles did appear to exceed the 25 feet in height, and the access road to the stockpiles are not on an all-weather surface. Just a couple of the pictures as we move through. You'll see those pictures, and the access is mulch and so forth. A couple more pictures of the stockpiles. From the building safety and permits, 7 buildings were identified as being constructed without building permits. Numerous building, plumbing, and electrical hazards were observed. Improper oil and chemical storage was on site, and the building official has initiated the needed permits for the property owner for the progress to begin. Just a few more pictures of the inspection and the buildings. The fire marshal also identified combustible liquid tanks on site, unapproved electrical condition, fire extinguishers required an inspection from a third-party inspection company. Again, stockpiles appeared to exceed 25 feet in height, and the access road to the stockpiles was not on an all-weather surface. And a few more pictures. Stormwater protection stormwater and resource protection concerns with the survival of the existing mitigation plantings were observed. Surety will probably most likely be required for the plant replacements prior to site plan approval. And just a couple of things from the owner progress. They have been cooperative and receptive during the inspection. They have removed a numerous amount of tires from the site at county's request. They've replanted approximately 30 trees that did not survive since the Board of Supervisors' approval of the SUP. They reduced some of the size of the existing piles. And then per emails that were received yesterday and today, which I provided each of you a copy, they have stated that the fuel tank and oil tank placards are in place. The fire extinguishers are in place. Electrical issues identified by fire will be completed by May 1st, 2024. They have hired an electrician, to look at all the buildings. Anticipated work to be completed by June 15th. Stockpile and access road will be fixed by June 15th, 2024. Mr. and Mrs. Hertzler are not in attendance today as their schedules and other factors did not allow them to make meeting time. They asked me to convey that they are working to address the issues. At this point, this concludes, whoops, I went the wrong way. Well, there we go. This concludes my presentation. In addition to myself, representative from the fire department, stormwater resource protection, building safety and permits, and planning is here to answer any questions that you have.
So what's the next? Are you out there again?
We will be. I've kind of put it back into the owner's hands to come up with a plan in which they have sent by email today of just some dates in which they are going to complete. So building safety and permits will follow through with the inspections of the buildings. She has mentioned, or Mrs. Hertzler has mentioned, to get back with the fire department regarding the stockpiles to make sure that we all are under the same measuring components. It should be from solid ground and not necessarily on decomposing material underneath. They have site plan that they'll have to follow through, making sure that the fuel tanks are located on there. We'll have to do some additional vegetation inspection as we move forward.
So I did have a question for the fire marshal.
Sure.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So a few months ago, we had a rather large fire, I believe at it was a wood pile, right?
Hankins.
Hankins, thank you. Would that be, was it similar to the stockpile? Did they have a similar circumstances to the stockpile that we're not seeing the right height here?
Well, actually, we have the fire marshal who responded to, who's been to both sites.
Okay.
And I did not go to the Hankins site.
Okay.
We have Fire Marshal, Assistant Fire Marshal Jerry Randall.
Okay.
Can probably better answer that question if he wants to answer that.
Good afternoon. Simple answer is no, they're not, I wouldn't say similar. So one of the steps in the SUP, why it's in there, and they did request our input in that, is the stockpile height from solid ground. That's something that we didn't see at Hankins, and that's one of the reasons why it was harder to control, because the pile kept on getting bigger and bigger and bigger from what we would consider hard ground. So the fire was allowed to stay warm, stay self-heating, and it produced quite an issue for us. So they don't have the same guidelines in their SUP that was written decades ago. So with this SUP, with those guidelines, I believe it would be a lot safer if they do measure it from solid ground and maintain those piles.
And the follow-up question would be the surface of the road. Should there be any issue, would a fire truck have issue getting back there with the mulch and the road not being?
Yes and no. So we wouldn't be able to get every piece of apparatus that the fire department utilizes back and around there, but we probably wouldn't need that. So we do have brush trucks available to us. We have hose available to us. The roads that are in place, they just need to have better foundations so that they don't wash out with water. They take heavy trucks back there now with his business, his tractors. It's not necessarily a weight issue, but there are turning radiuses that are concerning to us. But we are able to get to all areas of the current pile as long as it stays in the same location that it's in. We are able to get to it now with minimal amounts of hose and minimal amounts of apparatus.
Thank you.
Question.
Other questions?
Yes, question. Now, I went to the Hankins fire as well, and you know, and what concerns me is that this is even closer to the interstate. Hankins was close to the interstate. This is even closer to the interstate. And if we do have a fire in that area, which mulch will spontaneous combust, as we all know, and if we do have a fire in that area on that site, potentially could have accidents on the interstate and cause problems with the interstate. So I think that's why when we discussed it with staff, and that's why, and we were like, we already had this incident happen. We need these guidelines in here in order to make sure the height is right. We have access around them. The pile doesn't get but so big and has to be divided in order to get trucks. And as we know, once we start running water and all that on that mulch, if that truck can't move for some reason, get stuck, and we need to get it out of there, and the wind has changed and the fire's coming towards it, then we could lose a truck. Hopefully no one else, but we could lose a truck. I don't know what the cost was that we incurred as a county as far as Hankins, because there was multiple jurisdictional help with that fire. But it would be neat to know, it would be interesting to know what a cost to the county that fire was. And, you know, so that's, I think, why we put some of these things in place. And I take them very serious as being volunteer for a long time and watching what y'all do and safety and that sort of thing, that, you know, I don't mind them operating, doing the business and all that, but also if this happens, we need to make sure that the people that are coming out to help you put a fire out on your establishment are also fairly safe in their thing, and don't want anything that is put in place or left to be an issue when y'all come running in to help out. Thank you for your service, though.
I had a
Appreciate the
question.
support.
Yes, sir.
How close are the piles allowed to be? What is the distance between them so if one catches on fire, the other one does not?
So when you're talking the differences between Virginia code, our ordinances, and then what the SUP says, sometimes they say different things. So we go along with what the SUP will
I don't remember what the SUP said. Do you remember? I don't even remember that being on there.
It may not be. So
Yeah.
we go back to, we look at it and what's safe, because you can't just put a cookie cutter mold on every business. So the Hertzler property and the Hankins property are two entirely different animals.
Yeah.
We're talking one that's probably 20 times the size of the other. And this is, the Hertzler property is really one pile. Hankins property, you could probably say that there was
You mean
20.
Hertzler's only have one pile there?
One continuous pile. So I don't want you to think of a pile as it's just a pile of mulch. Now, this is probably 20 feet tall now. It was probably 25 or 30 when we first went out there in January. I believe we measured rough measurements. It's only about 80 or 90 feet long. and probably 40 or 50 feet wide. We call them windrows. It's some of the verbiage that gets thrown around. But
I just worry because I used to have horses in the manure piles, you know, they catch on fire too.
absolutely.
And if you have space between them, you get less of a fire. So
Right,
if you
and
have
it allows
something
us the
90 feet long,
right,
that's
you
big.
separate the materials, separate the
Okay.
fuels. It gives us an opportunity to get the apparatus in between them to get closer to. But like I mentioned before, if you had a windrow that was 150 feet long with no breaks in it, it's harder for us to park an apparatus at a safe distance, stretch that line, get people in place, do things like that. This pile and the property at Hertzler, it doesn't pose those problems. Now the roads will, if they're not improved, as they should be to handle our apparatus, the turning radius, the weight, and other things like that. But I believe that we'll be able to easily access all points of this pile if it were to catch on fire.
Right, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Appreciate it. Any other questions?
So what do we,
Christy, Ms. Parrish, I'm sorry.
Just fine.
Okay, thank you. I'm Ruth. Go ahead. This was a progress update, and we've asked our questions. Is there anything else that you need from us at this point?
There is no action that's
Okay.
needed for you unless there's direction that you would like staff to either bring back or.
Well, it
maybe
sounds
another
like
update.
you were staying on it with the applicant and, well, not the applicant, but with the owners of the property, and
We will continue to do so. And the first things first is clearly the safety. We want to make sure that those
Yes.
buildings, electrical, and any fire codes are remedied first.
Yes, and I would just, if you can just pass along that that's a great concern.
Sure.
So,
and do we know when they'll have these items wrapped up?
At least for the fire and the electrical, they have said June 15th.
June 15th.
That was the email that I received today. So, because I had asked specifically for a date and summary. So we'll make sure that we continue to assist them in getting into compliance, especially with those safety matters by then.
I think we got dates before too, didn't we? I'd be finished by,
Well, the first inspection was by April 10th, I believe. And that's, you know, to bring everything kind of into compliance and so forth. So we're continuing to identify those issues and work with them to continue on. Now, if it stops and we don't get the progress that we need, then certainly we could bring that back forth to you as a violation or take it to the next level of an SUP violation, either through the courts, or you would have the right to initiate a resolution to revoke the SUP. So we still have things in place if they stop with the progress or we have additional violations moving forward. So, but
they are making progress towards addressing the,
yes.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
When was your other inspection?
One was in January, one was in April.
Because it says electrical issues, fire department photos in process of updating and plan to be done by May 1. So that's what they're saying about the fire issues, okay.
Yeah, I think there's a couple different ones. Stockpiles were going to be finished in the all-weather service, I think,
By June 15th?
By June 15th, yes.
Okay. And the fire department pile spacing and access road completed by June 15th?
Yes.
So you'll be going out there after?
Yes, we'll make sure that we inspect those and have those conversations.
Okay, thank you.
How much in the way of staff resources is being consumed by this particular SUP holder?
Well, I wouldn't, more than most. And that's because everyone has been very diligent with meeting out on site. I mean, the first inspection, we had big trucks and tankers and EMT just to make sure that we can get around to the site and so forth, because we understood the safety concerns out there. So I would say more than some, but right now we're trying to put the ball back into their court to make sure that, you know, they realize that they have those issues that they need to resolve so we can come out and then inspect. So that's what we're trying to encourage them to do.
Would you say that, can you think of many cases in which have required this much attention?
I would say not many. I mean, every issue always brings a different perspective when it comes to enforcement cases. This one, myself as well as the deputy zoning administrator have been very much involved because we knew the importance of this 20-year issue to come into compliance. So it's taken a little bit more, but because there are so many different issues, we've had just so many different staff from other agencies to participate within this. A lot of times may be complicated and long-term solutions, but it's usually 1 or 2 people rather than 8.
Thank you.
Sure.
Mr. Eisenhower, do you have anything you want to add?
Nope.
Okay,
Thank you.
I have one more question. Have they addressed the pond that they built, the retaining pond?
Well, I know it's out there. I don't know. I'm not quite sure if there was anything that they had to address
I don't know,
unless they
like
wanted to use it as a water source for any kind of fire suppression.
I thought when you dug those that you had to have permission or a permit of some sort.
Like,
It's a
somebody.
like a BMP.
yeah, I'm gonna
Here comes Mike.
ask.
We have several people coming
Sorry,
forward.
look at them all rescuing me.
Oh, no.
Part of the SCP conditions required that pond to be turned into a level 2 wet pond, and that'll have to be shown on the site plan work what will be needed to be done to put that into place for stormwater management.
That's fine. Just wanted to know if it was being addressed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And for your question earlier about the pile separation, there is a 50-foot requirement to separate those piles if they do move forward with different piles. At this point, it's just been
That's a
the one.
huge pile. That's a huge, what, berm? Like a berm?
Yeah, it's one big pile, and then of course the mulch they do have in a little separate that they take to job sites. So it's some smaller piles
50
depending
feet,
on the
okay.
material, and then the one large pile.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Appreciate everyone and all their efforts. That brings us to the Virginia Opioid Abatement Authority. Barbara Watson. Good afternoon.
Afternoon, Madam Chair, members of the board. I'd like to introduce Denise Kirschbaum this afternoon. She is the Chief of Services for James City County Social Services, and she has been working with the other localities and some community members around a regional initiative in the use of the opioid funding.
Thank you.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Madam Chair, board members. So in 2023, James City County convened the Historic Triangle localities, other regional governmental human services agencies, and local nonprofits to explore applying for the optional regional competitive opioid abatement authority grant. The idea was to leverage the direct and title allocations to lump these dollars together to draw down more from the state. The group met several times in 2023 and 2024, and there were several great ideas. There were several programs and initiatives submitted to the group for consideration, all of them well-deserved to be fully funded. However, when looking at available funding, it was determined that we could not ask for everything. So overall, the grant requested budget, and I just want to take a quick moment to thank Stephanie with FMS because this is not my wheelhouse. The overall grant request budget is approximately $600,000. These programs were chosen for inclusion and were identified by the partnering local governments as those which they were more likely to invest in over future fiscal years regardless of OAA distributions. These projects requested have 3 components. The first 2 are dedicated to prevention and awareness and enhanced to already existing initiatives. The third is a new effort dedicated to individuals with substance use disorders who are involved in the criminal justice system. So I'm just going to break down a little bit about the projects. The first project is the Historic Triangle Drug Prevention Coalition, which is a multi-agency group that launched in 2017 with a mission to have a coordinated and collaborative approach to prevention, education, and advocacy to decrease the negative impacts of substance use in the counties of James City, York, and the cities of Poquoson and Williamsburg. OAA funds would be used to hire a part-time coordinator for the coalition to enhance their work. The second project was several substance use treatment providers in the region have the capacity to take on new clients. OAA funds would support marketing efforts for existing community-based treatment programs, including ads on buses, pharmacy bags, retail register tapes, or anything else that has to do with marketing. The third project is the Williamsburg, James City, and York Poquoson District Courts are collaborating and launching a new drug court in FY 2025. Court plans account for the legal and court plans account for the legal and administrative aspects of the new court. OAA would fund, support human services and social supports to ensure participants' success in this new program. If awarded, the funding will be for 1 year with an option to review for 4 more years at a 20% reduction per year. The first year of funding would allow us to right-size the grant and normalize funding to see what, if anything, funding would be needed in subsequent years, and to test the drug court services and see which or both are needed and are effective or would be effective. James City County has agreed to be the fiscal agent, and the application was submitted to OAA April 1st. We are working with the local governments to provide updates and get a consensus on committing their Virginia Opioid Abatement Authority fiscal year 2024 individual distribution amounts as a match to the application, which is approximately $150,000. So if there are any questions, I'll be glad to answer them, and I do have Stephanie here as well if there's anything related to the budget. But thank you for the opportunity to update the board.
Thank you. Any questions or comments? Thank you for the update.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. That brings us to the Government Center update. Mr. Stevens.
Ms. Larson has Mr. Reinheimer on another assignment this afternoon, so I thought I would do a short update on his behalf. He has continued to work with the builder and architects on programming phase within the building, which departments would sit where in proximity to one another to make sure that makes the most sense for us. We'll try to consolidate these space and conference rooms, so reducing the overall size of the facility. It's every department that needs a conference room, they can share conference rooms in many cases. So those are some of the details he's been working through with the architect. It's got the square footage to just over 180,000 square feet. Again, our initial proposal was 160, so we're making progress towards that. He did meet with the Assistant Superintendent, Daniel Keever, to provide an update on scheduled meetings with schools and the architects about the potential school administration building at the site, so those conversations are ongoing. We are touring Virginia Beach and Suffolk, I guess Thursday of this week. I think Mr. Hipple and Mr. McGlennon are planning to be there. If others are able to attend, you're welcome. We would just need to continue the meeting today because that would be a meeting if we have 3 of you. And so Ms. Knoll and Ms. Larson, Mr. Eisenhower, I don't know if you have an intention or ability to attend on Thursday, but it is all day Thursday, leaving at 8 in the morning and getting back late in the day.
Mr. Stevens, I'd just correct one thing to amend it. I had indicated to Mr. Reinheimer that I was not going to be able to make it after all on Thursday.
Perfect. So. We'll go on with Mr. Hipple. If one of you would like to attend, that still is not a notice meeting. If 2 of you would like to attend, we would need to do that. So, and we also are scheduling an employee input session for May 7th. So we've had some opportunity with our large staff meeting, the 80 or 90 plus employees, to have some conversations there. We're opening up discussion on May 7th from 8 to 12 here in the boardroom for any employee that would like to come in and just have some conversation and have an update of where we are. We have an architect pushing that we ought to travel to a facility that was built in Minneapolis. So we are tentatively scheduling that or thinking about that June 5th and 6th. So if you would like to attend, if you would let Mr. Reinheimer know, we will coordinate that appropriately. They would take lots of photos and video, but I do think looking at some of the latest buildings out there, and I haven't pushed back on why this particular facility, but our architects believe this is one we should go take a look at, and I've mentioned that a few times. So that is at least one out of state we would recommend seeing. And then we are holding our first community stakeholder group meeting on Wednesday, May 15th in the Glass Conference Room, Building D. You are willing to, or welcome to attend. If we get 3 of you, we would notice that as a meeting as well. It's at 4 o'clock on May 15th. And any questions or items of interest beyond that? All right.
What time is the community stakeholder meeting?
May 15th at 4 o'clock in the Glass Conference Room.
Okay. All right. Thanks very much. We have no board considerations. That brings us to board request and directives. Ms. Knoll?
I forgot what I was going to bring up. I went somewhere. Oh, I went out to the new junk luggers out in Tawano. I wasn't invited to their ribbon cutting, so I was kind of upset. So I went out there and I met the owner, and they own the drying company as well. And I said, "Welcome to the community. It's great, and they're doing really well in they're really excited about it. I think it's great. It's just right across from the convenience center, which is great. It's just another company, another business, more revenue for us. That's all I'm, and great people. So I met Steve, the owner. So that's it.
Thank you.
I'm good.
Okay.
Just two quick things. I wanted to, first of all, express appreciation to the county administrator, to Mr. Powell, and to all of our county staff for putting on a great service awards event at Busch Gardens, and appreciate the recognition for Mr. Hippel and myself, and all the county employees who've put in so many years, and hopefully many of them will continue on for many more years. And I also attended a session last evening sponsored by the Village Initiative. It's their 6th annual report on equity in the Williamsburg-James City County school system. Very interesting report with a number of issues raised about different levels of performance among students at schools, different issues related to staffing, and questions about ways to increase parent involvement. So found it to be a very interesting discussion.
Are they going to share that, or?
I think that they did. I think they sent out an email invitation to us all, and included in that was a link.
Oh, okay, thank you. I'll look further. That would be my fault then. I didn't see that link. So, all right, thank you. Yes, great event for employee recognition. Congratulations to 3 of you that were recognized for your service here.
For Stevens as well.
And just appreciate all the effort that goes into making that such a great event. So, and then that evening, I want to thank Jason. We had 2 very full weeks, and Jason and I just decided to continue that and have a community meeting on Friday night at 6 o'clock, which went, Jason said, I don't think we'll get that many people. You know, it's Friday night, and we had about 60 people. So, but we handled it, didn't we, Jason? Yeah, appreciate that neighborhood coming out and sharing. The next day, I got to do opening day, a few remarks, and throw out the first pitch at WYBL, and over 700 athletes, I think 58 teams. They're really starting to rebound from COVID, and just tremendous. The fields out at War Hill are 25 years old this year. They are beautiful fields, and I have to give a shout out to Parks and Rec for all their efforts, but also the number of parents that volunteer over there and keep those fields looking great. And I mean, it's amazing. And a particular shout out to Keith Cobb, that is still on that board and was on that board when I was on that board, and that was many, many years ago. Just really grateful for all the people that volunteer to pour into the young people in this community, into their lives, and the sponsors that help make teams happen. And just it was just a great day. It was a beautiful day. My son came out, my nephew. They had played out there, so it just made it really special. So
was it a strike?
I think so. If I were calling it, I'd have called it a strike. But I do want to thank Mr. Reinheimer, who's on secret assignment today, for helping me out, and I do very much appreciate that. And do want to take a moment and thank all the citizens that came out and spoke at our community meetings, and who have written to us and expressed their comments on the budget. And I did want to go back to something that you said, though, and I don't want to in any way discount people who I think you're right. They're not able to go out, and they're not able to come out, or but they can call us, they can email us. But I also have to, and I've talked about this before, but I also have to think about people like my mom, who's 81, lives in a very moderate home, the Roberts district, and still works full time, and of I hate to say no fault of her own, you know, she's seen a steady rise in her taxes as well, and she's never moved from her home. She didn't want to move into a larger home or anything like that. And, you know, I've been a little afraid to say anything about assessments to her, but, you know, she said, she brought it up to me one day, and she just said, you know, you've got to pay to have a great community. And so I'm willing to invest my money in this community. And so while I do think there are people that are not, I also think there's a lot of people in this community that realize that we have we're very fortunate with our police, our fire, our county staff, everyone that works hard to make the quality of life here important, and you know, they see the value in investing in it. And so I do want to give a shout out to all of our citizens that do that and pay their taxes. So Mr. Eisenhower.
Yes, ma'am. I had two items that I wanted to ask. One is if the county administrator can maybe have reach out to Glow Fiber and find out the status of connections in various neighborhoods. For example, Indigo Park was one where I had a constituent wanted to know what the process was and how far along they've come. If we can get an update by neighborhood as to what their progress is throughout the county, that would be very helpful. And the other thing is I will not be back until very late on Thursday, so I will not be able to participate in the trip on Thursday. Thank you.
And maybe we could, we've had a few issues with Glow Fiber and some cuts along the way. Hopefully we're having ongoing discussions with them about the importance of not cutting a gas line on a busy day that holds up traffic in one of our busiest intersections.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And
great.
Mr. Eisenhower, we'll try to get that answered for you as well.
Great.
Okay, thank you.
Reports of the county administrator.
Madam Chair, two items I'd like to mention. One, our drug take-back day is April 27th, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at the Law Enforcement Center. So that'll be Saturday, April 27th, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. Bring no questions asked. You can drop off drugs, and we will dispose of them in a proper manner. It is anonymous. Folks might be worried about what they're bringing. Newtown Tunes, just want to mention that is in partnership with the Newtown Commercial Association and James City County Parks and Rec and Culture Fix. Will begin May 1st. They're Wednesdays, running through June 12th behind Legacy Hall in Sullivan Square, weather permitting, and look forward to that happening in the coming months. So May 1st is our first one, and they'll continue every Wednesday after that until June 12th. That's all I have.
Thank you. All right, with that, I need a motion to enter into closed session for discussion or consideration of the acquisition of real property for a public purpose where discussion in an open meeting would adversely affect the bargaining position or negotiating strategy of the public body pursuant to Section 2.2-3711A3 of the Code of Virginia, and specifically regarding 7402 Richmond Road. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Mr. Stevens?
Ms. Knoll?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Mr. McGlennon?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Motion carries.
We're in closed certify the closed session?
Madam Chair, I move to certify that we only spoke about those items we indicated we would speak about going into closed session.
Thank you. Mr. Stevens?
Ms. Knoll?
Aye.
Mr. Hippel?
Aye.
Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Motion carries.
All right, with that, I need a motion to adjourn until 5 p.m. on May 14th, 2024 for the regular meeting, with a caveat that we may come together before then, but we would do our proper notice. So is there a motion?
So moved.
Thank you. Mr. Stevens?
Ms. Knoll?
Aye.
Mr.
Aye.
Hippel? Mr. McGlinnan?
Aye.
Mr. Eisenhower?
Aye.
Ms. Larson?
Aye.
Motion carries.
We're adjourned.
Doug's better